upset about. I'm hoping we don't have to deal with his ass again. But he did get a couple big rulings this week from the Supreme Court. So the first one was they decided to take up the immunity case, which was stupid. Because Jack Smith asked them in December about, okay, the immunity case, are we taking that up? Or would you guys take that up back in December? And the Supreme Court said, no, we'll just let the appeals court handle it. So the appeals court handled it, came back unanimous 3-0, saying, no, he's not immune. And they wrote a really bulletproof judgment on that. And sent it to the Supreme Court, and everybody thought, oh, there's no way the Supreme Court's going to take up this case. It's too stupid. And of course they said, well, we'll take up the case. Well, that's good for Trump because they're not going to hear it till the end of April. And then they probably won't rule on it till like June. Right? Because I think they have to do it before July 1st. They could delay it. I don't know. But while they're ruling on it, they can't take him to federal court for his criminal stuff. So they have to delay those cases. So that might end up being good for him, or it might end up backfiring, because it might end up being that he ends up going for the Jan 6 case for insurrection. And he's basically being tried for insurrection in September and October and November during the election. He's going to be in court being tried for insurrection. So they did hand him sort of a delay. It might work out in his favor, it might not. The other one they did was they came back and they ruled that on whether he could be disqualified from the ballot under the 14th Amendment. So just to reiterate, the 14th Amendment, Section 3 of the Constitution says if you've taken an oath of office and then committed insurrection, then you can no longer hold office. And I'm going to put a pin in hold office, right? So the Supreme Court heard the case, and they basically ruled, no. So Colorado was where they took him off the ballot, because he can't hold office, so why is he on the ballot, right? So the two courts in Colorado decided. The first one said, well, yeah, he committed insurrection, but I guess technically he's not an officer under the law, even though he's the highest office in the land. She kind of chickened out of that. That went to the appeals court. The appeals court said, no, of course he's an officer, take him off the ballot. And he committed insurrection. Plus, you have courts in, I think it's in Illinois and Maine, also said he committed insurrection. There are like 3 or 4 courts now that have found him guilty of insurrection. And Congress found him guilty of insurrection, right? When they did the second impeachment. So it's kind of weird. They said, okay, the states have to take him now off the ballot. All right, but the judgment doesn't make a ton of sense. And I want to jump into this. This is, let's see. This is George Conway. Hang on a second. We'll get into this in a sec, but we'll get into George second. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah. So the judgment is basically they saying the feds, the Supreme Court didn't even rule on the insurrection. They ignored it completely. They just said the states can't individually ban somebody for this. They can if it's a state person, if it's a state office, but they can't if it's a federal office. So it's kind of like a weird, fucked up patchwork kind of thing. And then they said, okay, but in Section 5, it says that Congress has to rule on this or something, which is not technically what it says. And so they're like, well, so Congress has to be the one that does this. So there's no real enforcement mechanism. So why are we kicking it back to Congress? Congress has already made a decision on this. It's called the 14th Amendment. It was made like 150 years ago. Why are we bitching? So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So here's George Conway. You might remember him. He's Kellyanne Conway's ex-husband. And he's not a Trump fan, but he was a federal lawyer, and he's tried cases in the Supreme Court. So he's got a pretty good view of this.
Coherent rationale to this opinion. And that, again, that's just not surprising. I think the bottom line, I think the most important thing to take away from this decision is the one thing it didn't touch, the one thing it didn't address, the one thing they were most terrified of, which is going anywhere near the factual findings, which were made on a very extensive record in the district court in Denver that Donald Trump was, in fact, an insurrectionist. And that is the most important takeaway, I think, of the day, is that they were absolutely not going to touch that one way or the other. And as far as I'm concerned, Donald Trump, just as he's an adjudicated rapist, remains an adjudicated insurrectionist, even if the Supreme Court has wrongly held that the states do not have the power to enforce Section 3 of the 14th Amendment as against potential candidates for federal office.
And when you say they just didn't want to play, because this obviously, I mean, this jumped out at me too, that the opinion didn't talk about whether or not Trump engaged in insurrection. And so it didn't, we had talked, when we talked about this before, there was this element of like, will they take up the facts as they are presented? Or like that they have to take up the facts as presented by the Colorado court? You might have to correct me on this if I'm saying it wrong. But but basically, like, they just don't even, when you say they didn't play, what you mean is they didn't even talk about this at all. It's just not in there. They're not going to talk about that.
They were determined to stay absolutely away from anything controversial politically, I think.
And he's right. He's right. They changed the question a little bit to, can a state do this? Not whether or not Trump should be taken off the ballot. And it's kind of a fucked up thing because that's the rule, that's the law, right, in the Constitution. So who enforces that? Who adjudicates that? You would think the courts would. But they're saying we're not even going to adjudicate on that. Congress has to do it. Congress isn't set up to adjudicate. Yeah.
How would that even happen? You know, what would that look like?
Well, that's the thing. So right now, it becomes completely partisan because you'd have to bring it up somehow in the House, which actually, I forget who's doing it. But yeah, they're actually bringing it. Oh, Jamie Raskin is bringing it up. As soon as they did the thing, he said, okay, fine. Then I'm going to bring up a bill that he be removed from the ballot. And he's got a bunch of people supporting him on that. But once again, the Republicans have a slim majority in the House, so what are the odds they're even going to let it go to the floor? So then it becomes a complete political issue. It's not a legal issue now of decision, and you take away power from the states, which is interesting because all these justices that pushed for this, they're very much like, oh yeah, states' rights. Oh, except for this, we don't like those states' rights. See, they like states' rights when it's the right states' rights, not the wrong states' rights, which would need to be righted by the states' wrongs that they're righting, but they're not going to do it. Congress has to do it. It's pretty much the whole fuck. I mean, it was a John Roberts special. I mean, they totally fucked this thing. But it's so stupid. But I want to get into this. So he had one more appearance. Let's see if I can find it here. I had it, but it keeps reloading funny. All right, here it is. And so here's what happened. So it was a unanimous decision, they said, and it kind of was. 9 justices all agreed, yeah, the states shouldn't individually be able to do this. But 4 of the justices, the 4 women, coincidentally, including Amy Coney Barrett, who Trump put in, who's a real right-wing nut job, she even said, well, wait a second, the Congress thing doesn't make a ton of sense. Why are we sending it back to Congress? You're kind of overstepped your bounds here. If we just asked, well, the states can't individually do it, that has to be a federal decision, well, then it should be some federal court. I don't know, maybe a Supreme Court of some type that makes that decision.
Gee, wouldn't it be great if there was one of those?
Yeah. But
maybe we should try that.
But if you have any doubt of whether or not this decision on their part was entirely political and had nothing to do with the law, then Amy Coney Barrett spells it out for you, and George Conway points it out here with Jen Psaki.
Shut up. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Of all people, Amy. Oh my God.
She gives away the game. Yeah, completely.
Different from these other provisions, and they're just making it up. And all the justices were making it up.
Why though? Why? You've studied this court for so long.
Because they were terrified.
Of what? Trump? The reaction?
The reaction. And I think that's clear from Justice Justice Barrett's concurring opinion. I mean, she says all of this stuff she says the quiet part out loud. This is not the time to amplify disagreement with stridency. The court has settled a politically charged case in the volatile season of a presidential election. Particularly in this circumstance, writings of the court should turn the national temperature down, not up. She's terrified. And they all were terrified, including the liberal judges. Okay, the only difference that I can see between what the liberal judges said and what the majority said was they probably would have restricted it to the president. But if they do that, the opinion would have been even worse, because at least it would have been looked like you just cherry picked the president out of a pile to say that the presidency is somehow special from all these other.
And there were other insurrectionists too, but.
And he's right. And that's, I mean, there's nothing else you can say. I mean, the Supreme Court, I mean, they've always been semi-political, but the whole point of the Supreme Court is that they're not supposed to be. And that's why they get lifetime appointments. And, yeah, go ahead. I mean...
Well, can I say it, Duncan? We freaking called this.
Yeah, we did.
So, boy, I wanted the whole time to be very, very wrong. And I wanted to believe that the Supreme Court actually had some integrity, but we called it.
But I think they've pretty much proven they're illegitimate as a legal system, and not the court necessarily, but the judges. And it kind of brings me to the point of like, I'm now at the point of like, I don't think you should be able to serve on the court for more than like 8 years, and then you gotta fucking be gone. Because giving them lifetime appointments, I mean, you see now what they do with them.
In any political office, where do we give a freaking lifetime appointment?
We don't, yeah.
You know?
Well, I think the founders, their concept behind it was, we'll give them lifetime appointments, that way they can't be bribed. Yeah, but if we say 8 years and you're fucking gone, you can't be bribed either. Because you're gone in 8 years anyway. I mean, so, anyway, that was that with the Supreme Court. I mean, you know, we'll see what it changes or doesn't change, but yeah, it was like we said before, they just pussied out. They took the chicken shit option, and they let politics rule the day when they should have made a legal decision. So on a legal decision, did he take an oath? Yes. Was he an officer? Yes. Did he commit an insurrection? Yeah. It should have been a no-brainer of a case. I mean, you know. But anyway, I know we got a lot of Trump stuff, but that's just because the election's coming up and things have been crazy with him.